Welcome. My name is Christina Susak, and I'm the head of UC Berkeley College of Engineering professional programs at the Satarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. We're hosting today's webinar as a prelude to a very unique opportunity coming up on November 11th and 12th, where the UC Berkeley College of Engineering is assembling some of the world's greatest thinkers, researchers, practitioners, and policy influencers in the AI space. You won't want to miss it. Without further ado, it brings me great pleasure to introduce to you the host of today's webinar, David Gallagher. David is an industry fellow here at UC Berkeley College of Engineering and actually designed our upcoming AI program on November 11th and 12th. In addition to being a global business consultant, he was recently VP of Engineering at T-Mobile and former head of reInvent at T-Mobile. David, take it away.
Thanks, Christina, and hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. Just a few words about me by way of introduction. My career, as Christina just said, my career journey has led me from being an international management consultant to an executive in the wireless industry. Today, my mission as an industry fellow at UC Berkeley School of Engineering is to demystify artificial intelligence for business executives, regardless of their industry or background, and to help them develop and implement winning strategies by harnessing the power of AI to grow their businesses profitably and responsibly while mitigating risk. As part of this mission, we've developed a new program that Christina just mentioned, AI for the C-suite, to help leaders of corporations develop their AI strategies. The first seminar will be held in person on the UC Berkeley campus on November 11th and 12th. We'll put up some information on how to sign up for this, and it should be a lot of fun and very informative. So let's get into today's topic, which is how to chart a course for success in AI. We'll update you on some of the success stories of AI and some of the common mistakes to be avoided. There's a lot of misinformation out there about AI, both wildly positive and hugely negative. It's hard to know which voices to trust, which brings me to my guest today, who literally wrote the book on trust. She's the author of several books. The latest one is titled Trust, Responsible AI, Innovation, Privacy, and Data Leadership. She's a thought leader in data privacy and artificial intelligence and regularly advises corporations on data leadership and how to drive profitability while navigating the challenge of this rapidly evolving landscape in data privacy and AI. She's an attorney with over 30 years experience in data governance, innovation, and regulation. I'm very pleased to welcome Dominique Shelton-Leipzig. Welcome, Dominique.
Hi, David. Nice to see you.
So just kind of framing up the current state of AI development for the audience here, Dominique, I've been looking for a metaphor that best describes the current state of AI development. And I really like the framing of AI being a liberal arts graduate, a new graduate who has got some good basic training, and unfortunately has gotten a lot of their education and information from the internet, complete with all its biases and misinformation, as well as the good stuff. It seems to me that our job now is to take this new AI graduate and turn them into a productive and responsible member of our organizations and of society as a whole. Do you agree with this framing, or do you see AI differently?
David, you couldn't be more correct. What is happening right now is we are actually hard coding in our history. What we do now or what we don't do will make the difference between whether AI achieves its ideals or whether we have a bunch of augmented awful incidents. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation to get the governance into leaders' hands.
Great. Let's start with the positives, because there's sort of two schools in the AI, sort of polarized views of AI One is wildly positive and the other is quite negative. I'd like to start with some success stories, Dominique. You've got a wealth of experience working with C-suite executives across a range of industries. What are some of the top AI success stories from your perspective and experience?
Yeah, so it's all about controlling the data going in and controlling the data going out. I live in Los Angeles, and one of our major hospital systems, Cedars-Sinai, announced in mid-January that it has used generative AI successfully to identify early detection of pancreatic cancer. And David, this quite literally makes the difference between a healthy future life and a terminal diagnosis. So this is exciting. Pancreatic cancer is so treatable if caught early, and the controlling of the data going in and controlling of the data going out successfully reached this result.
That's great. So let's turn to the other side of AI. Where AI goes wrong, and I like to talk about some of the major risks so that people can avoid them. There's some real horror stories out there about early AI implementation going wrong. AI medical algorithms and recruiting tools exhibiting bias against certain populations. Facial recognition AI leading to wrongful arrests. And generative AI today is becoming, almost a bit of a joke for making things up. What are some of the risks of AI from your perspective, Dominique?
So I think the biggest risk at a fundamental level is our CEO and board community not understanding that generative AI is just that. It's iterating, it's generating off of the whole wide internet. And as you said, the internet contains a lot of accurate information, but also inaccurate information. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to ensure that how AI is being developed and managed in your environment, that it matches the values of the company. So I'm going to give you sort of a few lighthearted situations, and then we can go into something more serious. But for example, just recently, I was reading in Vogue Business that company fashion label puts in a chatbot to recommend a product for people, and suddenly, consumer types in a desire for a particular type of coat, and what pops out is not the retailer's product, but a competitor's. Okay, that's the type of thing that can very easily happen without controls in place. Another example, a logistics company in the UK had a chatbot working for about a year that was accurately trained on its own data to respond to customer questions about where their package might be. You type in your tracking number, and 24/7, this chatbot was accurately providing information about when the package would be picked up and when it would be delivered. Suddenly, in mid-January, about the same time as I told you the success story happened with the Cedars-Sinai Hospital, but mid-January, right around that same time, the CEO of this logistics company wakes up to the name of the company trending on X, formerly Twitter. And basically what had happened is the consumer had typed in a question about where their package, what was going on with their package. And suddenly the chatbot started cursing at the customer, criticizing the company as being the worst logistics company in the world, and went on to berate the company for leaving the customer with this quote unquote useless chatbot rather than a real life customer service person. Okay, so these types of things are embarrassing. The example of the retailer or this logistics company, it's embarrassing for the company. But let's take a step back. If AI is drifting into areas that do not fit your company's values, what if this was our power grid or our water supply or a hospital table? That's why it's so important for us to get a handle on governance, checking output, controlling data going in, and controlling data coming out.
Yeah, it's sort of funny, but it's also scary, right? I mean, some of these applications are no joke. Obviously, you know, we need some guardrails and some guiding principles for AI so that it has, you know, the right ethics and values that we would want to mirror. And obviously, it's extremely challenging to get any group of humans to agree on anything, especially these days. Um, yeah, the challenge here is to not just get any, you know, group of humans to agree, but get the whole world to agree, right? AI doesn't necessarily recognize borders and company boundaries or country boundaries. How do you envision, and I know this is an area of deep expertise for you, but how do you envisage AI being regulated in the future on a global basis? And what are some of the key challenges and opportunities in establishing ethical frameworks for AI development and deployment?
Yeah, so one of the things that's really exciting is that what we're seeing around the world, and I had the opportunity to take a look at this in connection with the research for the book, in 100 countries in 6 continents, what regulators around the world are calling for are systems to catch practices that are most likely to cause harm to people. So the areas where the systems are being called for are in the areas that we would expect in regular life: health and safety, accuracy, right? Uh, Avoiding bias, promoting fairness, IP protection, privacy and cyber protections, and also for big companies, ensuring that you're in accordance with antitrust. Okay, so when you think about these big concepts today, every company, whether you're a startup or you're a sophisticated public company, thinks about these concepts, right? There's somebody in the company thinking about quality control and what your values are as a company in those key verticals. The key here, David, like you mentioned, if AI is a grad student or a college student, the key is to make sure that AI has your values and you have taught AI your values. And when AI departs from those values, that you are aware of it, you have visibility into it, and you can get the model back on track. So fortunately, we don't have to have a uniform metric for bias or IP rights or accuracy, because that will depend on each AI use case. But the company already usually has those metrics in-house, and it's a question of making sure that's translated in code numerically in the AI tool itself.
What about, you know, at the government level, you know, in trying to get, I know the European Union is something of a leader in this space of regulation. Maybe they're over-regulated, but you know, can you just frame up for us, you know, the sort of key maybe overlaps or differences between, you know, what the Europeans are doing versus North America versus China and others?
Yeah, so let's talk about where there are synergies that will actually move the needle for effective governance for our CEO and board community. So around the world, what they're asking companies to do as a first step is to risk rank their AI. Okay, so risk ranking, there are 7, think of it like a stoplight. You're getting to an intersection with your car. When we see a red light, we know that we need to tap the brakes and stop and not go into that intersection. It's the same thing with the legal frameworks for AI. There is prohibited type of AI that's just like a red light. A lot of science has gone into it, a lot of thinking about where it is too risky for private companies to go. Those 17 examples, every CEO, every board member needs to know what they are, because you don't want to invest a lot of money into developing an AI use case that is going to be banned in a couple of years all around the world. And by February 2025 will be banned in Europe under the EU AI Act. But things like social scoring, looking at a customer's activity in offline or online in products that aren't yours, and making a decision about whether that person should be your customer or not is the type of thing that is prohibited, will be prohibited around the world. Also, continuously monitoring the audio and video of people in public spaces. That's another thing that they don't, governments around the world, whether it's the EU, China, Middle East, Africa, and LATAM, and our own White House AI Bill of Rights, they don't want private companies engaged in monitoring the audio and video of people in public spaces because the risk of abuse might be too big. Similarly, when we get to a stop light, an intersection, we see a green light, and that's where we know it is safe to go into that intersection because a lot of science study has determined at that intersection when it's safe to get in. It's the same thing with low or minimal risk AI. Things like chatbots on a website or product recommendations are considered low risk. Now, just because the law considers them low risk, I told you the example of the chatbot cursing out the customer and so forth. As a company, you might decide that that's something you want to have more visibility into. But for low risk, the governance is very simple, just a transparency with the end user to let them know that they're interacting with an AI. The meat of the governance, David, sits in the what I call the yellow light or the high risk AI. There's 141 legal examples of those. A CEO and board member needs to make sure that their AI governance team is mapping their AI use cases to the 141 areas that governments around the world have determined to be high risk, and then applying the governance associated with that.
Yeah, I love the simple framing of a very complex topic with the red light, green light, yellow light. How do people stay up to speed with this, or how do they get access to this information? Obviously they can read your book, but how do people keep updated on this? What would you recommend resources for people to look at?
So there's so much material out there, and it's really important for our CEO and board community to cut through the hype, cut through the headlines, and get to effective governance in deploying these tools. And so, anything high risk, right? They're looking to make sure, really, the legal frameworks are looking to make sure that there's accurate data going in to train your application that is sitting on top of a large language model. They're not asking licensees, they're not asking financial institutions or healthcare companies or retailers to know everything that the tech companies have put into the large language model or the whole wide internet. What they're asking is, if you're creating your own application that's sitting on top of a large language model and you're sucking up insights like a straw from the large language model, they're just asking that the data that you're putting in about your own company and your own closed application, that that data is accurate, that you have IP rights to it, that you have privacy rights to it, okay? As a third step, they're looking to make sure, because the whole wide internet is fueling AI, and your insights from the tech companies are from that whole wide internet, 175 zettabytes, that's 21 zeros behind it, of stored data we have. And then we are also adding to the internet every day about 2.5 quintillion bytes, that's 18 zeros behind it globally per day. So what the regulatory frameworks are calling for is continuous. That means every second of every minute of every day, having code in your AI application so that you are continuously monitoring to ensure the AI is staying within the guardrails that we talked about for accuracy, health and safety, bias, cyber, etc. So it's called acting intentionally here with your AI, not leaving it to chance that it's just going to all work out okay, because models do drift. It's endemic with the technology.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and I know I actually read your book, and one of the things that resonated with me was, this concept of integrity, data leadership. But none of these companies exist in isolation, right? I mean, they're all part of a wider, ecosystem of, customers, suppliers, and so on. The value chain, goes on and on. I recall a couple of instances in my previous career with T-Mobile where there were major data breaches of customer information, social security numbers and dates of birth and stuff. Hugely impactful on the company, obviously, and massively impactful on the individuals whose data was compromised. In one particular instance, I remember when we did the investigation, we did the audit. What went wrong. There was nothing wrong with T-Mobile systems, right? They were doing all the things that they should have been doing, and all the protocols were followed. A major supplier, actually one of the credit agencies, um, also they did all the things they should be doing, and no issues there. But they had actually just acquired another company, a much smaller company, and hadn't yet done the due diligence on that company, and that's where the vulnerability lay. So it was 3 levels removed from T-Mobile, whose reputation was damaged by this data breach, but yet they had done nothing wrong, and even their major supplier had done nothing wrong. It was much further down the value chain. I mean, how do we legislate? How do we control, that sort of data breach?
Yeah, so this is such an important point, and vendor oversight is a big part of what the EU AI Act, as well as other jurisdictions, call for. But there needs to be a not only contractual guarantees, but certifications, proof from the vendors that they are complying with the expectations of the company, especially as it relates to things like security of data that your company's been entrusted with. Look, we have a retail pharmacy that ended up with a 5-year consent decree being imposed after an FTC investigation just in December, and they are now banned from using AI for 5 years. Not because of anything they did, but because the vendor's AI, that retail pharmacy failed to continuously test the vendor's AI, and the vendor's AI was misidentifying paying customers as shoplifters. Okay, so that company right now is in bankruptcy, 5 years banned from using AI, while all of its competitors are moving at Mach speed. So this is why we need to think about the governance and the vendor oversight as just part of our own brand and rigor. So the same care that we take with our own environment, we need to make sure that we have tentacles out into our supply chain and ensuring that our vendors are also meeting those standards. It doesn't hurt also to test output. And this, getting back into this continuous testing, you can filter out when vendors are not doing what they need to do. If you have things like malicious code that you have in your environment that you're already watching for, how about screening for that in output in your AI tool and ensuring that your AI tool is not spewing out malicious links that you're already monitoring as a company? And what that means is a cross-disciplinary team, David. I mean, quite honestly, the AI governance team, whoever is part of it at your individuals' companies that are listening, they're not going to catch every bias instance or cyber instance or inaccuracy. That's a cross-disciplinary team that needs to be drawn upon to find out what does accuracy look like in this particular AI use case. Going back to the chatbot cursing at customers, right? Why not, before deploying the AI, go to the customer service supervisor and say, how do you train our existing human customer service people? What are the do's and don'ts? the yeses and the no-nos. Cursing in any language we do business with our customers, for example, is a no-no. Translating that into code and then being alerted, not by a viral post, 2.2 million views on X, formerly Twitter, and headlines. How about being notified on your own dashboard that this is taking place, so that you're alerted before customers alert you that something outside of your values has occurred, so that you can take the proactive steps to fix the model and also reach out to your customers with care.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. I love the point about, and it really resonates with me, about this cross-functional, nature of this. I mean, this is different from, system implementations that we might have had in the past, where it could be siloed in sort of one department, or the realm of the CIO, or the information technology department. When I ran reInvent for T-Mobile, it was a complete reinvention of all of the processes in the enterprise-wide within the company. And there was 12 work streams were run in parallel. 4 of those work streams were deliberately designed to be cross-functional and to break down the barriers between silos. And it really resonated with me in your book that this is different from some of the systems that we've seen historically. AI touches every part of the business potentially, and it needs to be a cross-functional effort, and nobody can put their head in the sand and ignore this technology, or they do at their peril. Let's talk about the workforce and AI. I mean, my area of focus on AI is the business world and the workplace specifically. And it seems that, as you talk to people, there are widely divergent views on how AI is going to impact and is impacting the workplace. Some are saying at one extreme, it's just another productivity tool, right? The same as the calculator and then the computer, and now we've got this AI tool. It's no big deal. Others at the other end of the spectrum are predicting, 40, 50, 60% unemployment rate as a result of AI, with, the ensuing massive disruption to our society. Imagine the population with what we got, less than 4% unemployment today. Imagine if that was 40 or 50 or 60% unemployment. How would that impact society? From your perspective, Dominique, how do you see AI affecting the nature of work? I mean, not 20 years from now or 50 years from now, but in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, how will AI affect the nature of work? And I think more importantly, maybe for our audience, the skills required for continued employment in the AI world.
Yeah, so reskilling and retooling workers is going to be a big part of effective AI deployment. But as I mentioned earlier, just talking about something fundamental with generative AI, and this is very important for our executive community to understand. Currently, and we're probably about 3 to 5 years out from solving this problem, but currently, there isn't a generative AI model in the world today that does not drift. Okay, and what that means is that think of data and the internet being like a roiling ocean, and the applications that you're sitting on top of it being like a sailboat that's near a harbor. If you go back and check it once a week, or once every other day, or once a month, that sailboat, if it's not docked to the harbor, it's just sitting there on a roiling, moving ocean. That sailboat's not going to be there in the exact same spot where you left it. Okay, so this technology is not a set and forget situation. And as a result, how that impacts our workforce is that AI is going to require ingenuity, like I talked about, continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing. While you can have AI do that continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing, you're still going to need humans to be able to interact with the AI when it drifts, also when certain key decision making is occurring, just to ensure accuracy. So let's just start there. We're going to have hard-coded harms at scale if we just take our hands off the, and our eyes off the prize and off of the end product, and just assume that we're going to have accurate output each time. That's just not the way the technology works. So that's thing number one. So people think, oh, is AI being hijacked or hacked when we have quote unquote hallucinations or inaccuracies that pop out or bias, etc. No, AI is not being hacked or attacked in each of these instances. It's a natural state of the technology today that it will drift, and that we have certain things in our underlying internet. So number one, employees may have to change some of the things that they do. So maybe they're not doing all of the routine exercises that AI is automating, but there has to be a team looking at output 100%. Okay. Then we need to skill our workers so that they are able to incorporate and not be afraid of AI, to incorporate it into their day-to-day. And that means incorporating with care. Okay. I'll just give you one example in my own profession for attorneys. We had in New York as well as Brazil, attorneys filing briefs, relying entirely on AI, just taking their common sense kind of away. You would always look at what an assistant does for you, but just taking the AI at face value and filing briefs with cases that didn't exist and citing authority that was non-existent. Okay. One person had almost their license on the line and was able to maintain it by this error. So important for us to treat AI not as an omnipresent, perfect being, but rather a tool that can expedite things, but still needs to be reviewed for accuracy. Okay. That's, thing number one.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I've been thinking recently, AI is, artificial intelligence, but, I see AI more as augmented intelligence, where we're augmenting human intelligence with AI, not replacing the human. I was talking to someone recently, and a lot of the concern out there is, am I going to lose my job to AI? Is AI going to replace me? And I say, I don't think you need to be worried about AI replacing you. I think you need to be worried about someone who is better at AI replacing you. So it's not something you can hide from. It's something you need to embrace and educate yourself on. I don't see a scenario where the machines take over the world and Arnold Schwarzenegger comes and tries to kill us all. But there is some real risks and real threats for people and livelihood. And I just encourage everyone to learn about this technology within your discipline and industry, and get yourself educated. And that's what the mission that at Berkeley is trying to do, particularly for the business leaders. Let's turn to this whole concept of trust and AI, and a lot of what we've talked about today sort of boils down to how can we trust the output that's generated from AI, and how can we trust that the AI is going to be a force for good? You literally wrote the book on trust and AI, Dominique, and just describe for our audience here what does trustworthy AI look like?
Yeah, trustworthy AI looks like what is codified in these legal frameworks. It's all about action and intention with your AI to ensure that it's going to achieve the ideals that we all want: a better society, more efficient, augmented income, rather than augmented awful incidents at scale. All right, and that's why the education that you're talking about and humans getting ready for this technology and being part of architecting its future is so key and critical right now, because our window to impact how this technology is deployed is really in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I talk about this because we went through this in the early 2000s with privacy and cyber. And while there was inertia at the CEO and board level and waiting for things to happen, the systems got built in a way that basically we hard coded in a series of privacy and cyber holes and vulnerabilities that have bedeviled us for the past 25 years. We now have an opportunity to remake everything because AI is going to transform everything, and humans need to be a big part of getting to trustworthy AI. Worthiness in business is really key. The companies that are trustworthy are 400% more successful than those that are not. So from a business standpoint, getting trust right, we understand brands are built by trust. Your employees need to trust you, your customers need to trust you, and your business partners need to trust you. AI bloopers at scale will tank a brand's reputation. And that's what we want to avoid, as well as because of the harms that it'll cause people. So what we're talking about here is if you are in high risk AI, making sure accurate data goes into the training of your application. Monitoring every second of every minute of every day. That means code gets dropped into your application itself, just like sensors on our windows at home, those of us who have burglar alarms. When I'm at Berkeley and I live in Los Angeles, I don't worry about burglars coming in because I have an alarm company and I have sensors on my window. And if the backside window is open, I'm going to get a push notification on my mobile phone that says the backside window is open, and I can see whether it's a trusted person in the home or a criminal walking out with my television set. CEOs and board members need the same visibility. They need to know that the company has the same window into what its AI is doing as I have for my windows at home when I'm at Berkeley and my home is in LA. Companies need to know when their AI is veering from the company's standards on bias, accuracy, health and safety, so that action can be taken and we don't have awful incidents piling up on each other at scale. So we really want to have AI with intention achieve its ideals so that we can be alerted when AI is departing from our ideals to fix the model and get it back on track. And quite honestly, what the regulatory frameworks are calling for is that if you can't control the AI and you can't get it back on track and it's continuously recommending the wrong medication to people or cursing out your customers or providing inaccurate information for asset management, then they want you to kill that particular AI use case and go on to one that you can control. So the idea, going to your point, David, is not to have humans being controlled by AI, but structuring your company's processes and governance so that your company is controlling AI, not the other way around.
Great. So much in that, and so much to do in this area. Let's look at the peek into the future a little bit. And I know you're around some real thought leaders in this space, and some leaders of industry, and as well as the AI world and the regulation of data. I know it takes a brave person to predict the future, especially in this area, which is changing just so incredibly rapidly. I'm going to ask you to gaze into your crystal ball for a minute, and how do you think that these emerging technologies, like generative AI and large language models, how do you see them impacting the data landscape particularly, but just generally in business as a whole over the next, let's say 5 years? What do you see those big impacts as being, Dominique?
So, David, it's interesting. You should ask this question. So many of the business insiders that I work with jokingly call me the oracle of data because I often look at regulatory trends that don't hit our shores for another 5, 10, 20 years, but they do carry seeds of what the promise is for technology and also where the harms exist to be avoided. And I just want to give a little past as prologue and the fork in the road that we find ourselves in and the opportunity that we do have. So as back in the early 2000s, I was a newer partner in a firm and working with a lot of privacy managers and technical folks, cyber and chief information security officers, et cetera. And I saw that the legal frameworks had clear guidance on how to govern technology so that we're protecting privacy, steps that will avoid things like the recent business disruption situations we had that impacted so many airlines just about a month ago. Our regulatory frameworks outlined in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, precisely the governance necessary to avoid these types of issues. But because the laws lag behind the technology and they didn't get enforced until 20 years later, which is right about now, we're seeing the SEC guidance and GDPR fines at scale, FTC fines of the billions. We're only seeing that now, but the recipe for avoiding that was actually written down chapter and verse 20 years before. We're at the same fork in the road now. We control whether AI is going to achieve its ideals, believe it or not. If the governance that I discussed that is sitting in AI legislation that around the world, risk ranking the AI, making sure there's accurate data going in to train it, continuously testing, monitoring, and auditing output to make sure that it's doing exactly what the company expects it to do, technical documentation so that of those tests, so that when the AI drifts, not if, when it does, humans can get the model back on track. And if humans cannot, that we have a fail-safe to exit that AI use case and get onto one that works. Those are the 6 steps necessary to make AI safe. And the only question will be, and our challenge will be, whether our leaders and our board members and our CEOs embrace this as part of using the technology and we reach our ideals of augmenting income, raising awareness, finding cures for cancer, advancing healthcare, getting to individualized learning for kids around the world so they can learn cognitively just the way that their brains work. We can achieve that goal state if we get the governance in place now as we're building it. But if 18 months from now, we're still frozen and making things so confusing when they're just these 6 things that need to happen, we're going to be exactly where we found ourselves with misinformation, disinformation, all the things that happened in social media, et cetera, at scale. So I'm excited for this challenge and for our the learning that's going to take place and that you're going to lead at Berkeley and the discussions that I'm seeing happening in many C-suites and boardrooms to try to get this right at the building stage. Right now is our window.
Yeah, it's exciting times for sure, and again, it really resonates with me that now is the time, right? I mean, this is. I remember. I won't tell you how long ago, but as a graduate student studying some of the early instances of AI, which was called expert systems, many years ago, we've had a number of false dawns, as Stuart Russell likes to call them. And winters within this sort of AI journey over the last, let's say, 30 years. But this time is different. It feels like it's really happening, and this window that we've got right now, the next year or two, is really going to be crucial for how AI develops. There's no question it will develop. It's just a question of how it develops. Finally, final question. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for our audience questions, and I see a number of them are coming in on the chat here. When I talk to people about AI, they tend to fall into two camps, right? They're either they talk about a world of abundance where the cost of production is so low that the costs of goods and services is virtually free. The drudgery of the repetitive tasks are removed from our work lives, freeing us up to be more creative and self-actualized as humans. And then the other side is describing this sort of dystopian hellscape where there's high unemployment, there's civil unrest, there's an even bigger gap between wealth, the haves and the have-nots as we see today. Where do you fall in this spectrum? And with your insight and conversations that you have with thought leaders and experts in this space, how do you see the near-term future of AI? Are you an optimist or a pessimist on this, or somewhere in between?
So I remain always an optimist, David, and the steps to get us to the goal state, the self-actualization, the creative state, the beautiful state that you described are outlined in our legal frameworks that won't become law for a couple of years, but that should not impede our adoption of these 6 steps. There's a lot of hype about the negative, where it could go, and you talked about hellscape. We will get there, however, if no governance is in place. And when I say no governance, getting away from busy work or silos or turf battles to effective governance. Having a bunch of written policies sitting in a room or on a file someplace is not going to get you to the goal state of AI. It's going to get you to the hellscape. Practicing 6 steps that I talked about, making sure that you're not developing prohibited AI in your company, and getting a hold of those 17 examples of what those are. Things like social scoring or monitoring people, but all 17 are on my book website. Know what those are so you're not sinking money into developing something that has been predetermined to be very likely to harm people and harm your brand. All right, that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is, if you are in high risk, anything having to do with financial, children, healthcare, our critical infrastructure, our power grid, manufacturing, etc. Okay, but know what those 100. At least know that someone in your company knows what those 141 are, and understand that those 141 high risk areas are not going to stay static. You need to stay on top of this on the regular. It needs to be part of enterprise opportunity management and enterprise risk management going forward. But these 6 steps need to be part of just the resilience to run this technology. Without it, it's like trying to drive a car with no brakes. We're going to have harms at scale, hard coding, awful incidents like no tomorrow. So that's why it's very important to titrate on this effective governance that comes out of the large language model experts such as yourself telling us that models move and drift. So in order to address that, we need to adapt.
Yeah, right on. Couldn't agree more, Dominique. Thanks a lot. We've got some more questions online here. I want to just get to a couple of them. I'll be respectful of everyone's time and end on time here. But this first question here that's up on the screen, from a compliance/risk perspective, how do you monitor the risk as the risk profile changes when AI drifts? What type of synergies would the teams who monitor outputs need to have?
Such a great question. So the beauty is AI right now, for the most part, is automating activities, the use cases that companies are moving forward. And I see this whether it's healthcare, finance, retail. The use cases that companies are putting forward are those that were being done before by humans. All right. So taking a step back, monitoring AI doesn't mean divining some new standards for quality control, right? Those exist in the company. So what I encourage a lot of my companies and clients that I work with is to look at, when you're doing product development today, who do you turn to ensure that the development is fair and not biased to any customer? Okay, there's somebody, whether it's a chief equity medical officer, whether it's a DE, and there is somebody responsible for that for each particular use case. Someone in HR, or if it's lending, someone's dealing with fair lending. That individual needs to be contacted and say, for this particular use case, how do we avoid bias? And they just need to tell you. They're going to know that off the top of their heads. And that verbal metric needs to be translated into code that the AI can understand, so that your company is alerted to the verbal parameters that you already have. When AI is departing from those, that's the time where you need to step in. Okay, so we're not talking about an AI governance team working in a silo, or an AI IT team working in a silo trying to figure out a fairness metric or a bias metric. No, it means that AI team being resilient to reach out to the subject matter experts in the company and get the right metric to put into the tool. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, great. I mean, it just reminds me how important it is to have. One of the things that we're working on at Berkeley is, an AI certification, an AI competency, certification program for, whatever your function is within the company, whatever your expertise is, or your department. Everybody, as you said, this touches everyone in every department within organizations, and we all need to have at least a base level of competence in this technology. And this drift that you talk about, I think, is so important. That's what AI does, and that's what AI will do. Left to its own devices, we need to have lots of
And to your point, AI does this, and drift can lead to beautiful results like early detection of pancreatic cancer. What the company needs to do is ensure that the AI's drifting is not departing from the values that you have and what you're trying to achieve. So, somebody asked earlier, how can you continuously monitor? That exists today. There are data scientists that take the company's values as it relates to a particular use case. Let's say it's drug development. Who needs to be in the clinical trial, what genders, so forth. They report on this regularly to the FDA, and just making sure that the AI knows what those metrics are, so that you don't have a trial tool that is leaving out, certain genders or different ethnicities. This is about calling upon the strengths of your organization and communicating to the AI, just like you would to an employee. AI is not going to understand English, French, or German when it comes to your guardrails. That has to be translated into code.
Yeah, it reminds me of the early days of the quality revolution that happened in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I guess, with what was called total quality. A lot of it came out of Japan, but this concept of the production line, where there used to be that you had this production line and everyone did their part along the production line, and then the quality control person at the end of the line either accepted or rejected the part. And that, obviously, the problem with that was it was all the way down the line, and all this value had been added and cost had been added. And the revolution was to inject quality at every step of the process. And it strikes me that the AI is a bit like that, where everybody needs to be responsible for AI, not the IT department at the end of the line, because it's too late by the time it gets to them. Some of these fail safes that are built in, the damage is probably already done by that point. So again, it just speaks to how everyone needs to be educated in this space. Last question here, Dominique, and it's one about. I guess it's asking about Zoom and AI, and I guess it's getting to the whole area of deep fakes, and there's a lot of news out there about deep fakes, particularly in the political environment that we're in right now. Talk about that a little bit, about what your perspective is on deepfakes. How do we know that who we're talking to is really who we're talking to? How do we know that the clip that we see from a politician or even a CEO? I mean, there's been a lot of this recently in business, where the CEO was given an address to the employee base, and it wasn't actually the CEO talking. It was AI. So, how do we detect this? How do we regulate this? How do we protect ourselves from misinformation?
So this is a big topic, and I'll just lay out a couple of things. So misinformation, unwittingly and by mistake passing along false information or disinformation from our state-sponsored, many times state-sponsored attacks to destabilize, whether it's elections or companies. As you mentioned, CEOs have been impersonated, and transfers of funds have actually occurred to the tune of millions to threat actors. So this is so important. First, if something doesn't make sense, if someone is speaking against their interest, no matter how accurate or how much their voice sounds like them or their face looks like them, but if they're a politician telling you not to vote, or you're a CEO telling your CFO to send out billions of dollars to a contact that you've never heard about in the company, that's the time to pause and get some additional verification. All right. See what the politician has said otherwise. Check with the CEO's secretary or other assistants to say, is he really having a meeting right now? Is there a stealth meeting that's supposed to be happening with me? That's how one CFO was able to prevent millions of dollars going out the door, because there was something that just didn't ring true with the CEO's request to stealthily transfer millions of dollars to this unknown entity. We're going to have to really put our common sense caps on, because it is hard to detect fake video. You can see sometimes blurriness. Shadows might give you some instance, sort of strange cadence and talk, so that you hear echoes in the background, or murmuring or other noises in the background, or a slurring of words, quickness in speech, or undue slowing. Those are sort of some signs. But look, 40% of the time when humans have been given this information about how to detect audio that is fake, they've been wrong. So this is not an easy thing to detect. We're going to have to also, and I'm a big believer, and I'll just throw this in, David, of establishing repositories of truth using technology. I'm a big fan of blockchain for that purpose. Putting in video that and messages that the CEO really cares about, that politicians care about. Putting in audio that is accurate and pointing people to that information and that repository of truth.
Great. Well, that's about it. That's about all we've got time for, unfortunately. I'd love to talk all day, Dominica. It's just a fascinating topic. Common sense and AI. Maybe that's the next book. It's that sort of sums it up for me. It's just don't park your common sense at the door when any machine is taken over. So thanks very much. Thanks everyone for listening. Dominique, it's been great. Look forward to our next engagement in November. Thanks everyone. Over to you, Christina.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, David and Dominique. And thank you to all our participants today on behalf of UC Berkeley College of Engineering for joining us in this thought-provoking conversation. It will be continuing on November 11th and 12th on the UC Berkeley campus. Please join us. And all participants this morning's webinar will receive a 10% discount code. So please follow the link and register. It's Berkeley in all caps, BERKELEY 10. And we'll see you at AI for the C-Suite on the UC Berkeley campus, November 11th and 12th. And there's Dominique's book on trust as well. So please check that out.